Have the change of stole ceremony to signify this transfer of responsibility and spiritual care for our soldiers and our airmen in the Georgia National Guard. I have a number of people I could thank, and I'm going to thank some of them. One of them, of course, I want to thank, as did Chaplain Davis, our great God and Creator, for the opportunities that I have had and for the great people that I've got to meet along the way. I want to mention Chaplain Tom Stokes, who was my first brigade chaplain when I was in the Tennessee National Guard. I scared him a few times as a young direct commissioned first lieutenant, and that he was patient. He had a little experience. He was the first National Guard chaplain to be mobilized for Operation Desert Storm. So he had a little bit behind him, and he worked with me and tried to craft me during the 4 years that we shared an office in Chattanooga, Tennessee, before I accessioned active duty. Later on, he would retire as the state chaplain for Tennessee. And there's a picture that in the slides that were up there, maybe afterwards, of him and me standing together as a lieutenant colonel and a captain. Two future state chaplains. That picture I treasure. Also very, very thankful to several of the commanders that I've had, who inspired me with their vision, with their dedication, with their helpful comments along the way. There was that commander that was referenced earlier who, when I was a lieutenant, said, "Chaplain Summers, we're transitioning to multiple launch rocket system for maintenance howitzer. I want you to take this course for familiarization." I want to make that clear to General Grant. For familiarization, I didn't fire anything, but the Army never trained me to use a 9mm or an M4 or anything like that, but they did train me how to take out a square kilometer. I feel prepared to protect myself and my family. Lieutenant Colonel Ann McDonald at Fort Campbell with 600 1st Aviation Battalion also was a great leader. She had been a member of one of the first female graduates of West Point. Just an inspirational figure on her route, and we worked together. She had in her aviation battalion that we had the Pathfinder Company, the only Pathfinder company in the Army. So she became the first female commander of infantry soldiers in the Army. And one of our memorable experiences was when a helicopter flown, as we always remembered, by another battalion's group, but carrying 7 of our Pathfinders, crashed and killed 4 of the Pathfinders and 3 of the crew. And it was a moment that impressed on us and on me, particularly the great honor that chaplains have in comforting the grieving and honoring those who have passed on. I served in Germany for 3 years. While there, got to serve as a port chaplain in Marietta, Croatia, and in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, I was Chaplain Ed Martin, who's the Catholic chaplain at Fort Stewart right now. We saw off 1st Armored Division soldiers as they were going to Iraq in 2003. Of course, I know where I was on September 11, 2001. I was in a chaplain's meeting with grade support battalion chaplains in Mannheim, Germany, when we got the word. And that changed our lives remarkably. September 11, 2001, it took me 10 minutes to drive to work. September 12th, it took me 2.5 hours to drive the same distance to get into the post. And it was a time of great strain on our soldiers as they went into new procedures, new security measures. And I think it was harder on some of us older guys than it was on the younger ones in terms of the transition. Then I moved to Fort Stewart, become the chaplain of the 1st 64th Armored. I was supposed to join them on August 15th, 2003, in a laid-back location called Fallujah in Iraq. But their orders changed, and they came back the day before I was supposed to leave. So I worked with them in helping them recover. I was preparing the EGS, and one day as I was leaving the hospital at Fort Stewart, suddenly, I'm a captain at that time, a colonel was looming in front of me. And he sticks out his hand, he says, "I'm John Owens, and I want you to work for me." If you remember Chaplain Owens, he was a force of nature. And he let me know that I was wanted on his team. He had a plan for me. He knew God did, but he did too. So I signed on and went to the 648th Engineer Battalion. I mentioned in a staff meeting, you'll remember Colonel Gaston a few weeks ago, that there was one of our staff members who had served on 3 different levels of staffs with me, Colonel Bossert. Colonel Bossert and I came to that battalion together at the same time. I was coming off active duty, pretty highly strung. He was coming straight back from a deployment as pretty highly strung to be the S3. And we shared a couple of things. One was being forced to take a mud bath by the soldiers of that battalion, literally being dragged through the mud. And the other was a love for the military decision-making process, which meant that occasionally we clashed, but which probably was unexpected to him. But it was, later we would deploy together. He was the deputy commander, me as brigade chaplain for, again, the 648th, but Maneuver Enhancement Brigade. And now together serve on the Joint Staff as chaplain and the plans officer. But it's been an honor to serve with them and with people like Lieutenant Colonel Lesneski, who became a great friend over in Afghanistan and working with the 648. And also people that I depended on like Lieutenant Colonel Allen, then Major Allen, make sure our communications worked. And Captain Higgs, whose wedding I got to perform during that period, and one of the more memorable weddings of my experience in good ways. And I always will remember the homemade soap that you had at the reception. That was a wonderful, wonderful touch. But it was, but I liked the way that you and your husband I think your father tied your arms together as a sign of the bond that you were going to have. Spent 21 months of my career in Arizona as a Georgia Army National Guard chaplain major on Operation Jump Start. 16 months on the border working out of Fort Huachuca, and I loved it. I was doing about 300 to 500 miles a week, going in GSAs from remote location to remote location, sometimes transferring into more heavy, durable vehicles, wearing my vest, my helmet, preaching to soldiers in the desert. I talked to a friend of mine who was in 3rd ID, Chaplain Sid Taylor. We had both preached in the desert. We had both preached to soldiers in remote locations. And, but only I had preached in the middle of a sandstorm. But we had outstanding soldiers there. The last 5 months there, I did dual duty. Chaplain had moved up to Phoenix. They needed someone who could write. And I had been an English teacher after I ETS, an English teacher at Bradwell Institute. You'll recognize that as the school you see as you leave Fort Stewart. English and history teacher there. But they needed someone who could write and edit and understood history to work with the lessons learned team. So I got to be part of the 1st National Guard lessons learned team. This is actually submit an after action report to the National Guard Bureau. And that was memorable also. And the reason I brought that up is that when they were, as I was doing the research for that with my team, and everybody on my team was from the Air Guard, by the way. I was the officer, but all my team was Air Guard. We discovered that when they were planning the operation in Arizona, what positions they needed, filling out the UMR, that projecting among their 1,200 soldiers. What we do about chaplains? We'll have the state chaplain on a shelf over here with the words that people remember. But we won't need a chaplain. And about a month later, a female specialist, 36 years old, from Pennsylvania, working at a remote observation outpost, passed away from dehydration. And the first thing that was said, where's the chaplain? And there was no chaplain. So National Guard Bureau then received a request from Arizona for chaplains. And the first 2 who sent a reply, I was told, were Chaplain Don McDaniel and me from the Georgia National Guard. We led the way. The Georgia National Guards, who I mean by we, in getting out there. And it was one of those career, there are certain experiences that sort of impress themselves on you. And that was one of those. Part of me almost wanted to stay out there. But I just had to come back to you all. Especially those of you like chaplains like Andy Shepard and Shelby Grant. People that sort of needed me to come back. And because I'd already been shaped by great brigade chaplains like Chaplain Ed DeCampo and John Tatum. John's here today, and I'm thankful for being here, John. And it's, we shared some great times. I deployed with 648, well, yeah. I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia for 2.5 years as mobilization chaplain and rear detachment brigade chaplain. And that was great too, and that was where your influences on me helped too, where people like now General Blackstock, who had been my 1st battalion commander in the Georgia National Guard, his influence sort of rubbed off, helped me be ready to go to Fort Stewart and be the MOB chaplain. And a great chaplain mobilized over 20,000 soldiers while I was there. And I worked with the crisis management team as their chaplain, because the installation chaplain said, you're a National Guard chaplain. This is your bailiwick. I need to prepare you for bigger things down the road. So that really, really helped in the last couple of years with ice storms and vigilant guard. I deployed with the 648th MEB to Afghanistan.